Good morning and welcome to today's administrative meeting of the Public Service Commission. Before we get started, we haven't met in a few weeks. Our last meeting was on November the 7th, and we have minutes to approve there. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes from the November 7th administrative meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
The minutes from the November 7th, 2018 meeting are approved. Before we get started, for those watching on television on our YouTube channel, I'd like to note that we crossed a threshold yesterday with 100 subscribers. So hopefully our Twitter feed and Instagram will keep up with that. For those who want to subscribe and get instant notifications when we do have meetings here on the bench, just click on the subscribe button, which is just below Commissioner Linton's nameplate. You'll see that on your bottom right-hand corner. There you go. Okay, we have 9 items on the agenda this morning. Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We do not have a consent agenda this morning, and before we start, we're going to be deferring the last 2 items on the agenda, item 8 and 9, to a future administrative meeting. So the first item on the agenda today, item number 1, is Tenney Journal Communications, Inc., filed an application for operating authority to provide resold local exchange service in Maryland.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is an application by Tenney Journal Communications Incorporated for operating authority to provide resold local exchange service. The Commission has expressed authority to require resellers to obtain authorization to provide service under the Public Utilities Article, Section 8-403. The Commission requires all telephone companies that seek to provide service in the state to file an application using the model application form available on the Commission's website, which Tenney Journal has submitted. Per order number 88353 in case number 9414 dated August 24th, 2017, competitive local exchange carriers having 20,000 or fewer subscribers are permitted to provide regulated retail services without the requirement to file a tariff schedule of their rates and charges. Since Tenney Journal has less than 20,000 customers, the company is not required to submit a tariff with its application, but has instead provided a signed affidavit stating that it will file a tariff with the Commission at such time as its subscriber base exceeds 20,000. The company has provided the Commission with a link to the company's pricing guide on their website, and the pricing guide will be posted on the company's website upon approval of the application. Staff has reviewed the filing and believes that the applicant has met the requirements to be unauthorized as a CLEC. Staff recommends that the Commission grant the requested authority and grant the company the requested COMAR waivers in Waiver Group C.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. Is a representative from Tenney Journal Communications with us today? No. Do Commissioners have questions on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we grant the company authority to provide resold local exchange telecommunications services in Maryland and grant the company the requested COMAR waivers in Waiver Group C.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, item 2, is Charity Plus Power, Inc., filed an application for a license to supply electricity or electric generation services in Maryland.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. This item addresses a request by Charity Power for authorization to operate as an electricity supplier limited to broker services for residential and commercial customers. Management has significant experience in the industry. As part of their proposed brokering, they have contracted with 3 suppliers. Staff's review of this application has taken quite a bit of time due to novel issues regarding what costs are eligible for the purchase of receivables program under which a utility buys a supplier's receivables, and the utility then includes those supplier charges as part of the consolidated bill that the utility sends to the customers. Staff has had extensive discussions with Charity Power over the past several months about their business model, and Charity Power has revised its business model several times to address concerns expressed by OPC and staff. Their current business model is for suppliers to offer a product in which Charity Power will make a donation to a charity chosen by the customer. The donation will be equal to the difference between 1, the projected supply rate of the utility during the contract period, and 2, the supplier's base rate plus 0.3 cents or 3 mils. Charity Power said that the 3 mils represents the cost of their broker service for the supplier. Charity Power told staff that this formula for the donation is intended to make the rate plans more competitive with local rates. They've executed agreements with suppliers in which the supplier returns a broker fee to Charity Power, and this fee then includes a donation component, which Charity Power agrees to donate to a nonprofit organization, again chosen by the customer. Comar states that, quote, the utility that is providing utility consolidated billing shall either purchase the receivables of a supplier or prorate customer payments between the utility and the supplier. In 2009, the Commission noted that, quote, the requirement for the purchase of receivables relates to only the commodity charges, and the utility is not required to purchase non-commodity charges. As a result, the tariffs of Maryland utilities make it clear that the purchase of receivables does not include, quote, receivables associated with non-commodity charges or early termination fees. The issue of severing supply charges and non-supply charges in connection with POR is important for 2 policy reasons. First, a utility can terminate service for a customer that's delinquent on its charges. Then, therefore, if a bill is higher because of a non-supply charge, and that's in POR, that increases the likelihood that the service could be terminated by the utility. Second, utility distribution rates recover uncollectible costs across all customers. Essentially, the costs are socialized. And thus, again, if a non-supply charge is in POR and the customer does not pay this charge, this charge is spread across all customers. As noted, because Charity Power will rely on a formula to determine the exact donation associated with each customer's monthly bill, the donation is a discrete and clearly identified portion of the supplier's charges. Therefore, staff believes that the charitable donation portion of the charge is ineligible for POR, and because of this, we think that as a practical matter, it would be virtually impossible to sever out which piece of the charge is donation and which is not. So therefore, staff's position is that none of Charity Power's charges are eligible for POR. Charity Power has agreed with this. They've been extremely cooperative with us from the start. They made it clear that their business model is to make this donation to charity, and they'll accommodate however the Commission determines is an appropriate way of going forward with that business model. Another reason it would be hard to sever out the donation pieces, as the Commission is probably aware, a lot of these suppliers are buying on daily markets or short-term markets, so the cost that they've associated with each transaction is a constantly changing number. We would distinguish the situation, and we think this is important, from where a supplier makes a general claim that they're supporting local communities. And in fact, in September 2018, a supplier named Energy Rewards filed marketing materials that said that, quote, they've donated $19.1 million to nonprofits that are, quote, fighting for climate justice. I mean, we think that it's to be encouraged utilities and suppliers to making charity donations, but in the context of a situation like here where it's a discrete portion of the rate, we bump up against the restrictions in the POR. OPC on November 19th filed comments that agreed with staff's position that Charity Power's charges are ineligible for POR. Based on all this, staff recommends that the Commission authorize Charity Power to operate as a broker and that the Commission determine that Charity Power's charges are not eligible for POR.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Office of People's Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Philip Sheen on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel, reiterating our position from our November 19th letter to the Commission. The Office of People's Counsel has reviewed Charity Plus Power's application, its website, its responses to staff and OPC inquiries, and its March 2018 email in which it revised its business plan. Based on our review, OPC supports staff's recommendation that the charitable donation portion of a customer's billing be deemed ineligible for the utility purchase of receivables program, and with respect to the grant of the license, OPC neither supports nor opposes staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Sheen. Is there a representative from Charity Plus Power here today? Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Richard? Oh, sorry. Were you going for your mic? Or?
Yeah, just so I understand, is the broker fee, is that an eligible charge that could be recovered through POR? mean, if you just look at the fee itself,
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Matt Bonikowski for staff. So generally speaking, staff's position is that broker fees would be permissible under POR. As a practical matter, suppliers and brokers need to be able to earn a return on their service. If that's denied under POR, I think that would be very difficult to do. They would need to basically execute dual billing for every supplier in the state. What we think is different in this case is that there is a donation portion of the bill integrated into the broker's charge. And as Mr. Elbert stated, it would be, practically speaking, very difficult to sever the donation component from the underlying broker charge. So when we consider that as kind of an inseparable unit, we find it has an ineligible charge within it, and therefore staff's conclusion is that the entire charge cannot be recovered under POR.
okay, so it's just the knowledge of where the broker fee is going that causes the staff.
Yeah, it's the inclusion of that donation.
But otherwise, I mean, are there other, in a sense, that could just be the broker's profit from whatever service they're providing the retail supplier. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Is
Okay. All right. That's why I was just struggling a little bit. Why do we even care what the broker does if they want to make a 10% donation on behalf of the customer? They could do that, or they could do any number of things with their profit. But anyway, I'm just trying to fully understand why we are so concerned about the fact that our knowledge that they are going to use it for donation is somehow
Well, yeah, I think what causes trouble,
Problem.
too, as Matt was alluding, this is a discrete portion of the rate that the customer is paying. Now, yes, technically it's part of the fee, but as a practical matter, the customer's rate will include this, clearly defined piece that will be going to the donation. Although ordinarily, you're right, broker fees, from a supplier's perspective, is just a general one you could consider as one of their costs of doing business associated with the general supply function. We don't obviously regulate the suppliers, so we don't have information on those sort of things, what they're paying for different aspects of their operations. But yeah, it's the fact that this was a discretely identified. We've never seen that kind of business model where they have targeted a discrete portion with a mathematical formula to determine what goes to charity.
Okay. And then just on for retail suppliers, oftentimes there's an offer of a gift card or other type of promotional items to get a customer to sign up. Are there similar concerns about those type of giveaways, or is that completely different?
Well, yes. Obviously, in looking at this, that issue, came up, other related. We decided for purposes here to focus on this specific situation, which frankly is a bit easier because, if you're getting a gift card or other rewards, it's not tied to a specific aspect of your rate. This was kind of an easier low-lying fruit kind of case where here, this is the extreme case where they discretely, discrete portion of your rate is going to that non-energy product. We have not looked, and we may indeed need to look at those other situations, the gift cards, the airline miles, that, obviously are not supply products, but at the same token, are not necessarily tied to the rate you're paying.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I note the buck sheet in the complaints section says that the company is licensed as a broker in Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas, but they don't have any customers or haven't begun operations, so they have no complaints. When they were approved as brokers in those states, did they have this business model? Do we know? They did. How did the other states handle it?
So yes, this business model is consistent across all states where they're operating. I don't know that this was raised as an issue internally by any other commission. It may have been. I'm not aware if it was.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know if staff knows the answer to this, but you noted that Charity has agreed to modify their business plan in order to address the concerns that staff has raised. But you also noted that Charity had signed contracts with 3 different suppliers. do we know if those suppliers are comfortable with offering consolidated billing?
So those contracts were executed before the changes to Charity Plus Power's business model. If the commission determines that the broker's fees are ineligible for POR, any contracts would be subject to that, and if the contract can no longer be executed, a contract may need to be dropped as a result of that clause. I don't know specifically for those three companies that they've executed with whether they would be able to move forward. We did reach out to BG&E to try and get a sense of whether there are suppliers in the state that are offering dual billing right now, and they indicated that they believe that there are several companies that would be able to, Charity Plus Power would be able to enter a contract with and engage in this business model.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Harmon.
So I just want to be clear that what staff's recommendation is that Charity Plus would only contract with suppliers that offer dual billing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if we were to revise the motion to that effect and not make a ruling on the broker services or the charity portion being ineligible, we would be able to approve the recommendation of staff and be able to approve the license without reaching the issue, the legal issue associated with the charity portion being eligible or not eligible. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And so staff and Charity Plus are both amenable, if you know, to the commission limiting their application to contract with suppliers that provide dual billing.
Both parties are amenable. It's certainly not Charity Plus Power's ideal result from this. Of course, they would, like to be licensed without restriction, but they have stated that they are amenable to only operating through dual billing, not using POR for that portion.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And to be clear, Mr. Sheehan, Office of People's Counsel concurs with the limitation that Commissioner Herman just mentioned.
Just a point of clarification. Suppliers that offer dual billing, that they will definitely dual bill for the charitable contribution portion as well as the broker portion?
It's my understanding that dual billing would be dual billing, that they would be offering, they would bill separately, but, their entire, dual billing to me is dual billing where the supplier is separate from the delivery charge.
Okay.
That's my understanding of dual billing. I don't know, Mr. Albert, if you have a comment on that.
That's the way we view it. And indeed, Charity Power told us that they're operating in states, or they will be operating in states that don't have POR. So they were not all that phased, as Ms. Bonikowski indicated. They weren't thrilled about the idea, but they indicated their suppliers would be willing to operate under the dual billing regime, that they were used to that in other states. So that it could go forward with that model.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission grant the company a license to operate as an electricity supplier in Maryland limited to broker services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff, with the condition that the company only contracts with suppliers who utilize dual billing, and direct the company to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the application.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Next item on the agenda, item number 3, is Delmarva Power and Lake Company filed a letter to the Commission regarding its alternative plan in regards to the Efficiency Customer Investment Fund, case number 9156 and 9361.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a filing by Delmarva Power and Light requesting Commission guidance on how to use the company's remaining $7.66 million of Customer Investment Fund funds. The Customer Investment Fund is an outcome of the merger between PHI and Exelon and was created as one of the conditions in the Commission Order number 86990 in case number 9361 approving the merger. Specifically, as a condition of the merger, Exelon was required to provide Delmarva with $11.7 million in funding for incremental energy efficiency program support in the Delmarva, Maryland service territory. Delmarva was directed to use the funds to create pilots for innovative energy efficiency programs under Empower Maryland, with a minimum of 20% of the funds to be spent on energy efficiency upgrades in affordable multifamily dwellings. $7.66 million of the fund remains unspent. In its 2018 through 2020 Empower Plan, Delmarva established 3 new and innovative programs: the Family Farms Program, Schools Program, and Energy Efficient Communities Program. Delmarva proposes to apply its remaining CIF funds to these 3 new programs, thereby offsetting a portion of the Empower Maryland surcharge. Staff believes that this would be an efficient usage of the CIF fund and would be consistent with prior Commission orders defining the purposes for which CIF monies may be spent. I note that yesterday the Office of People's Counsel filed a letter that disputed staff's opinion on that. Specifically, OPC does not believes that because these programs are part of the already approved suite of the 2018 through 2020 Empower programs, they do not qualify as new and innovative and therefore should not receive the CIF funds. Nonetheless, staff continues to recommend that the Commission approve the use of CIF funds for the Family Farms, Schools, and Energy Efficient Communities Empower Maryland programs, as well as the Residential Smart Home Pilot Program and any future program investigation, development, and design programs.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. Mr. Raker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Good morning. Mikhail Raker on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. Staff did correctly note that we filed a letter yesterday asking for the Commission to deny DPL's suggested use of the SIF funds and staff's recommendation to approve that suggested use. And I think the one clarification to staff's note on our comments was that we don't dispute that the programs are new and innovative, but rather that they're incremental to the already existing Empower programs. As those programs were approved by the Commission as part of DPL's Empower plan and therefore are part of the budget and part of the surcharge, we think that they therefore are not incremental to the existing programs. And the Commission has, we think, spoken to that effect, specifically in order number 88007 when it said that the application of customer investment funds to offset the previously approved budgets do not satisfy condition 3C. So just as a point of clarification there. As a general matter, we do thank DPL for its initiative in filing its June 27th letter and for its suggested use of the customer investment fund funds to benefit its customers, including residential customers, but we would ask that the Commission deny DPL's suggestion in its letter and staff's recommendation for approval. As an alternative, and as explained in a little bit more detail in our letter, we suggest that the Commission instead direct the Empower work groups to consider how to best incorporate SIF funds in their respective pilot proposals. So, and in making that consideration, some of the background is that historically when the work groups consider pilot proposals, there's a framework that those pilot initiatives be sort of framed within the already approved budgets. And with a little bit more leeway, such as using SIF funds for pilots specifically targeted at DPL service territory, that may serve to foster possibly innovative proposals outside of the pre-constrained budgets. And we note that the behavior work group is due to submit at least one or maybe more pilot proposals in compliance with the Commission's directive by the end of November. And similarly, the finance work group may also be proposing some pilots in response to the Commission's directive to file a report in April. And we think that such pilots may, in fact, be new, innovative, and incremental to the existing Empower programs. And so with that, I'm open for any questions.
Why don't we hear from counsel from Delmarva first?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Doug Mike Keel. I'm here on behalf of Delmarva Power and Light Company. First of all, we're seeking your guidance on how to spend these funds with respect to the new and incremental issue regarding the programs that are contained in staff's buck sheet. I think they are new and incremental, and that earlier order was talking about programs that Delmarva Power had in place prior to the merger. The programs that we're asking for the funds to be offset here are suggesting they should be offset, and staff is recommending the schools, the family farms, the energy efficient communities, and the smart homes. Those are new, incremental programs since the merger. And I would point out that there's $7.66 million. The offset, as indicated in staff's buck sheet, is about $4.6 million. So there's still money left over to do these other things that OPC is suggesting, and that's certainly something that Delmarva would consider. But again, we're here asking for your guidance on how you want us to spend these funds. And so we would have approximately like $2.4 million of unspent funds, and we have some ideas. We're thinking about proposing a food bank program to provide more lighting to food banks, which is consistent with the 3C requirement that we do something with respect to the low-income customers. And again, we could use some of the remaining funds perhaps for the financing work group. But we're here for guidance. We think that the staff recommendation is appropriate. It's consistent with Section 3C, and it benefits all customers.
Thank you. Do we have another party wishing to speak? No. Okay. Thanks. Mr. Raker, how do you respond to what Mr. Mike Keel just said? Basically, that these programs are, he concedes that they are new, but they're incremental since the merger. Because I don't quite understand People's Council's opposition, aside from the fact that it may not be consistent with the letter of the merger condition.
Well, we think that the funds would be best appropriated towards those programs that directly, incremental meaning, allow for expansion of betterment or of existing programs, meaning those programs that were approved as part of DPL's new Empower plan. And we think especially with the new cycle looming ahead, and a lot of the conversations that we've had in the past semi-annual hearing, there's quite a bit of room for innovation and for new pilots. And with these monies, certain pilots can be specifically targeted at the DPL service territory, and the learnings from those pilots can then be applied to the other service territories, and no additional requests for budget increases would be necessary in order to do that. So although the programs that the company notes are new and are innovative, they're part of their suite of programs that they propose in order to achieve their goals that they're statutorily required to achieve. And that was part of the package that they proposed and the commission then approved.
One of my concerns is the fact that this money has been sitting around since, I believe, 2015. If we go forward with your request to establish new pilots, obviously that'll take some more time to design the pilots, to have the commission approve them, and to have them rolled out.
It may take some time, certainly, but I think there are timeframes already in place. So some pilots will come before the commission at the end of December from the behavior work group. If there's guidance from the commission that these funds can be applied, but potentially towards the budgeting for those pilots, that may possibly give the work group some initiative to innovate further in some of their recommendations, especially for pilots for the DPL service territory, where they won't be constrained by the current budget limitations. As I noted, the finance work group is due to recommend pilots in April, so that is a little bit looking forward, but certainly with additional commission guidance in place, those conversations can start. The commission can also provide the work groups with more status reports where they can see work group activities and potentially evaluate any initiatives that the work group is considering before final reports are due.
Thank you. I've learned a lot about work groups over the past 4 or 5 months, more than I'd like to know, and more status reports. And yes, I think sometimes it does provide a better product, but sometimes these work groups, I think, just move more slowly than I would have hoped for. And I wouldn't have thought it would have been so difficult to spend $7 million, but apparently it's turning into quite a situation. Thank you, Mr. Raker. Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, I would just ask People's Council, do you see that there is a benefit to ratepayers if, to pay for these approved new Empower programs with these merger funds, rather than having to collect those directly from ratepayers through the surcharge?
We, of course, note the benefit. Any decrease to the surcharge excuse me, is certainly a benefit to the ratepayer. But we weigh that against certain learnings and other initiatives that would need to happen as well in order to have and move forward most effectively in the new program cycle. Pilots will need to occur. Ideas will need to come forth, and it would be best if those ideas are tested before they're launched in the new program cycle. And so there's certainly monies that will also be need to spend there. And whether those requests come before the Commission for increases to already approved budgets, and then those will hit the ratepayers later on through an increase in the surcharge, or those funds come out of this SIF bucket, we think that it would be better if the approved budgets stay in place and are not offset, but rather that these funds are then used for further incremental development of programs, ideas, and initiatives.
Okay, so do you acknowledge that if we do continue with these other work group programs, there could be a charge later on?
There very well may be.
To the Chairman's point, is this time value money, isn't it better to use the funds we have sitting in wherever it is, a bank somewhere, and also save some charges on ratepayers now? Isn't there a benefit to doing that? And then when the time comes and these other programs are approved, then raise the funds?
So there may be a small incremental time value of money benefit. That's certainly an analysis we didn't specifically conduct. But I think there's also a perception, at least in the work groups, that certain ideas and pilots should be constrained excuse me, within existing budgets. And there's some hesitation to come forth and request especially larger increases to already approved budgets, whereas if these funds are available and there's a guidance from the Commission to say that these funds can be used for budgets that better empower programs, there may very well be an uptick in workgroup activity in terms of compliance with that guidance.
Okay,
but we certainly note your concern, and certainly the time value of money issue is one that is real.
Okay, thank you. It just seems that there is an opportunity to use these funds right away now for these new programs, and we just don't know what the work group is going to do, so it seems like there's some uncertainty on that side of it. But anyway, thank you. No more questions.
Of course.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Michael, can I ask you a couple questions?
Yes, sir.
Do you know how much your proposal will decrease the surcharge for the ratepayers on the shore?
I have not done that calculation. I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Staff have any idea?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Matt Bonikowski for staff. I believe the Farms and Schools program for the residential surcharge would be about 30 cents, assuming that there was full payment of those program costs over the three-year program cycle.
Weren't there a couple other things you're
There's
proposing
a
here?
CNI program as well. I didn't do an analysis on that one. I just looked at the residential side.
So it's not a big bill impact for the...
Because of how the costs are amortized and what the payment period would be, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Michael, was this proposed when the 2018 to 2021 cycle
So we didn't do a good job of highlighting this, Commissioner, is the real answer. I guess we knew the funds were there, and we figured that the funds would be used like that, and we didn't highlight it as appropriately as we should have, is the short answer.
Fair enough. I would hate to think we approved those programs and with some foreknowledge that we were going to be back in here proposing to pay for them with other funds.
Yeah, I don't think that's what happened, and these funds were certainly out there, and we were hashing through the 20% for the multifamily, which we've already got in place, as you know. And I guess I would just point out, even if you accept staff's recommendation, which we suggested in our letter, we still have $2.5 million of unspent funds. We think one of the things we'd like to do, and we would propose it to the commission, is again do a light bulb program, continue our light bulb program for food banks for another 2 years to get some more light bulbs out there to help the low income communities, and our numbers look like that's like 103,000 for each year. And then of course we would be willing, as OPC said, to look at funding perhaps for the financing working group or something with the remaining funds. But I think we have a real opportunity here to do something now.
So that was the third question I was going to ask you. Twice now I've heard you say you would be willing to do something with the financing work group, but I didn't hear you mention the behavioral work group.
So,
is that intentional?
So both of them are potential. The issue that I have, Commissioner, with the behavioral work group, as you know, the pilot that we have recommended in the behavioral work group is for Pepco. And the way I read the stipulation is all of these funds are supposed to go to Delmarva Power, and so we'd have to develop from scratch a new behavioral pilot for Delmarva Power, and we could do that, I assume.
We don't even have the work group's report yet. It's still in process. Are you telling me something that I don't even know, the commission doesn't know?
Well, no. I was just referring to, we had the behavioral pilot on the budget billing, and that's part of the work group.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about something else that the behavioral work group may be
No,
working.
I'm not presaging anything that the work group, no, sir.
I'm glad to hear that.
No, sir.
Okay. Let me ask staff a question. Thank you. I think in two previous orders, we denied use of SIF funds for reducing the surcharge in one and supplementing the multifamily home program. Why should we change? Why should this commission change that posture? Because this would be a change. So tell me why you're recommending we change the posture from the previous two orders.
I'll let Mr. Bonikowski give most of this answer, but I did want to make one point with respect to the incremental question, or whether or not the programs that we've suggested are incremental. And I think we tended to view them as such because they're brand spanking new. And they are incremental to anything that has existed previously prior to the Commission's approval just last month. So that's where we were coming from on that question. And beyond that, I would like to turn this over to Mr. Bonikowski.
I think that is the crux of our position, is that we believe that this current proposal involves new and incremental programs in a way that the two prior proposals that the Commission denied did not. One was just a straight reduction of the surcharge. That would have just been a general fund decrease. The second was related to programs that had existed prior to the 2015 merger. So we find this to be a distinct case from those, because we do have these three new programs, plus the PID programs and any future PID pilots that would be separate and new after that merger.
So by that logic, we could use these funds for anything under the sun that happened after the merger that applies to energy efficiency.
Related to benefits to Empower, I believe Condition 3C does constrain it under that, but yes, to the extent that there is a new program or new pilot.
That's where I'm having problems with that, because I think we've already approved these programs. They're part of Empower now. Currently, they're approved. They're on the books. And so I don't view this as incremental to that. I think it's different. But thank you.
Commissioner Herman.
Mr. Raker, you agree that these programs were not existing at the time of the merger, is that right?
They were not.
Right. So I'm having a little trouble with your legal argument that these are existing programs, because how are we not writing out the word existing? I mean, does that have no meaning in the condition? Because it doesn't say existing and future, it says existing, and to understand what existing means, it would be at that time, not any time into the future, because any time into the future would have been written in, or it would have not say existing, it would just say Empower Maryland program. So are you not writing out the word existing in your interpretation?
Well, I think we are, Commissioner, and specifically, we also think that the Commission spoke, at least in minor part, to this specific point in that'll be order number 88007, and I think we quote the language in our letter, but I'll note it here again, that in reaching their determination to deny Delmarva's request for offsetting the surcharge, they note that the application of customer investments funds to offset previously approved programs or previously approved budget, especially those approved prior to the consummation of the merger. So meaning with that word especially, I think the Commission made the determination that it would not be limited strictly to those approved before the merger, but it would be new and incremental to those approved as part of a plan that was submitted for compliance with the legislation. So that would be our reading of it. It would be new and above what is currently in play and what is currently approved, meaning as of today, the new program cycle.
But you'll agree, though, that existing in the condition itself would mean existing at that time, because it couldn't mean anything else, could it?
Well, it could mean existing at that time. It could mean existing as of the time that a proposal to use the SIF funds is put before the Commission, and considering it was looking forward to funds that would be put before the Commission for approval at a later date, it will be existing as of that approved program plan. Could be one interpretation.
Right. But to me, I think that interpretation writes out the word existing. It just says Empower Maryland programs. And existing, in the plain language, mean existing at that time, not existing into the future, because you would not need the word if it was existing into the future.
Again, that could certainly be one view. There could be a view that certain programs may have terminated in the past and were not part of a new plan. And then there could be a question of were they existing at the time, if you're looking at a new plan as of today, or if you're looking at a plan that was previously approved. So certainly there could be different interpretations of existing.
And you'll agree that the two times that the Commission denied the use, those were both for existing programs that existed as of 2015. Is that correct?
Those were as of that particular time period. Yes,
Okay.
Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for the company regarding some information that the staff produced in their report, in their buck sheet, specifically referencing the Family Farms and Energy Efficient Communities programs. They basically note that, at least as of right now, there's not a lot of participants in either program. They're both kind of still ramping up. So
That's correct.
So do you anticipate that these programs will still have the activity and participant levels that you initially projected for both pilots?
Wayne Hutters for Delmarva Power and Light. Commissioner, the programs, the Family Farms programs, I think when we reported back just recently at the semi-annual period, I think we reported that the program was just ramping up. Since that time, we've had one project completed. There's another project that's in process right now, and I know there is additional, marketing and going on right now. So the program is slowly ramping up, and we are starting to see some results from that program. Will the dollars all be used or as planned, I can't say for sure, although I am pleased to know that we do have the first project underneath us. One of the things we've been hearing, there's a lot of word of mouth in the farming community in the Delmarva Power territory, so, if they can point to this farmer did this, then others are more likely to trust, what their brethren farmer has done than just an idea that's been put forth in front of them. That's what we've been hearing, so I'm encouraged that that program has had a project completed and has others in the pipeline, and hopefully that will lead to more. As far as the communities go, that's a similar story. When we reported back, I don't believe we had any communities then. That we've since completed one small project, and we are in discussions with several different communities, some of which could be significantly larger. So I think in that program, using the budget up appears that that's probably a little more certain or likely than necessarily on the family farms, but both are moving in the right direction.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that, on the Family Farms program.
Yes.
When we did the semi-annual update, there were no participants in that program.
That is correct.
Can you give us an update on that? Tell us.
Yes, we've now completed one project. There's one family farm project worked on replacing the lighting in, I believe, some sort of poultry house. Was completed. We have another one, I believe, that is in progress right now, and we are talking with other partners. We're also talking with the State Poultry Board, I believe, as you yourself has suggested we do, which we thought was an excellent idea, and we have worked on that as well.
And the Farm Bureau.
The Farm Bureau, that's what I meant. My mistake.
But the poultry industry, Delmarva poultry industry is another good reason.
Right, I believe we're talking with them as well.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I do support staff's recommendation here, returning benefits from the fund to customers as quickly as possible. Hopefully, with that recommendation, Delmarva will have sufficient guidance that it was looking for to go forward with the expenditures of at least a good amount of the remaining $7.66 million. And Mr. Michael, what did you say? There'll still be $2 million left over after?
On my arithmetic, it's about 2.4 million, a little up north of 2.4 million.
Okay, so there will be opportunities to look out at how that money is spent down the road. I would ask that you continue to work with staff and People's Council on those efforts. For this item, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner
I think so.
O'Donnell.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Mr. Richard.
Before we move forward, let me just indicate, I'm going to support this motion to approve these items, but I have to tell you, it raises some troubling questions in my mind with regard to how we're using these funds. I guess the decision in my mind comes down to it's better than letting these funds sit unused and unapplied to the energy efficiency programs in the state of Maryland, but it doesn't come without some questions in my mind. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, for item number 3, I move we approve the use of SIF funds for the Family Farms, schools, and energy efficient communities Empower Maryland programs, as well as the residential smart homes pilot program and any future Empower program investigation, development, and design programs.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda, item number 4, is the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development filed a request for approval to amend its price list for measure offered under its LIHEAP program.
Thank you. Is there a representative of the department here today? No. Oh, yes. Thank you. Mr. Dean.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Michael Dean on behalf of staff. Item 4 is a filing by the Department of Housing and Community Development requesting approval of its individual measure price list for the Empower Maryland Limited Income Energy Efficiency Program and authorization to allow retroactive payments for work performed by contractors for these measures. Commission in Order Number 88514 authorized the Limited Income Energy Efficiency Program for the 2018 through 2020 program cycle and authorized the Department to realign measures with the scope of work and market prices with future changes to be reviewed by the Empower Limited Income Work Group. The work group and staff have reviewed the proposed individual measure price list as discussed in staff comments, and the proposed pricing reflects the market rate for the individual measures for work performed by state weatherization contractors. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the Department of Housing and Community Development's individual measure price list for each bidder and allow retroactive payments for the work performed from the time period from the effective dates of each agreement to the date the Commission approves the new measure pricing structure.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Good morning to department personnel. Do you have any opening statement?
Good morning, Commissioners and Mr. Chairman. We do not have an opening statement per se. I'm happy to provide a little bit of context and detail if you'd like that.
We'd be happy to hear that.
Okay. I'm Amy Grasso with the Office of the Attorney General, and I'm here with Mr. Valvey and Ms. Tran. With respect to this request, the Department of Housing and Community Development conducted a procurement. DHCD needs to conduct a procurement anytime it is securing services or goods from private contractors. There is also an existing price list, as you are aware, which identifies prices per measure. So the department, needs to comply with the requirements of the procurement process, which really, as its pillars, are competition, transparency, getting the best deal for the state, and also to comply with the requirements that are set by your commission and the Empower program. So in conducting the procurement, they started out with the price list, and because the process requires competition and getting the best deal for the state, the instruction in providing the financial proposals for the contractors was initially to provide a price factor for each measure. So, refrigerator costs, the cap is X. You can either bid 1.0 or 0.9 or 0.7. So the price list was really set out as a cap. It became apparent at the first meeting, pre-bid meeting, that many contractors were not going to be able to submit proposals with the price structure that was set out and with that price list as the caps. And, really what the department's response was, and keeping in mind that, I for fear of becoming a witness to my own client, the department has struggled to comply with every requirement that is imposed by this commission, that is imposed by the procurement laws, and to, really get the result that we're all seeking here, which is good work done by good contractors for a good value to the state. So the decision was made that the contractors would be permitted to bid at price factors exceeding a number of 1, but that they would not be paid those prices until, if and when the commission approved those individual price measures. So the list of measures, was it 400 or 500 measures?
I think 300.
Okay, so there were 300 measures. Each contractor submitted their technical proposal, which was evaluated by a committee. Then they submitted a price proposal, and their pricing was based on a price per measure, and then that price per measure was built out into a sample 1 year.
It was a sample scope.
A sample scope. So it wasn't that, they weren't all equally weighted. They were built out into a sample scope, and that overall scope pricing is what was used for the department to evaluate the financial proposals and to develop a ranking. As you probably know, that evaluation of financial proposals is really just ranking the least expensive to the most expensive. Financial proposals are then, looked at in conjunction with the technical proposals, and a final ranking is developed based on who can do the best work at the best price overall. So the department did that. There were some price measures that came back at a factor above 1, some that came back at a factor below 1, and the department really looked at the overall pricing for the scope, and has made contract awards, has gone to the Board of Public Works and received approval for the contract pricing included therein. But because of the existing price list being the limit that can be paid, no one has been paid anything exceeding the currently established cap pursuant to the price list that's in place. So the request of the department is, A, we're asking the commission to approve individual contractor pricing for those measures that exceed the pricing established in the price list. And that is because this does represent the market. This is what the department has to do through the procurement process is determine what is fair, reasonable, a good deal to the state. And that is determined in conjunction with the quality of work that the contractor is able to perform. And then the second thing that the department is asking is for you to approve retroactive payments to those contractors. And that's based on the same principle that it's fair to the contractors, and it really is the right thing to do. I can tell you that I think one of the reasons that the issue with the price list came about and why the pricing was lower than what the market rate was has to do with the fact that the contractors did not participate in the work group meeting that was held to develop the price list. And the reason for that is because there was a procurement being developed, and to have a contractor participate in the development of a price list that it would be then bidding on was viewed as a conflict. And we didn't want any contractors to be excluded from bidding on the RFP because they had participated in the work group. So this was overall the best solution. I think we got a really good result. The contractors that had the overall highest ranked will be assigned more work. So if there is a vendor for which the overall scope was more expensive and they ranked lower, it's likely that they'll get less work, so that will be balanced out overall. Is there anything else that either of you would like to add? Okay, so that's my opening.
Thank you for that background. People's Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mikhail Raker again for the Office of People's Counsel. We filed a very short letter noting the reasonableness of DHCD's filing and our lack of objection thereto, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. For the department, how often is the price list updated?
So the price list is bound to the contract, and it is reviewed on an annual basis, but it's a long process to make any changes to it on the contractual side. So as of right now, the prices that we got through this procurement, they're locked in for 3 years.
They're locked in for 3. So the price list that we have before us would now run through 2021.
Yes.
Okay.
Unless there's any material changes necessary, and there would be a motion to make changes due to outside factors. If industry costs change significantly, then there could be any amendments, but it would have to go through a whole process of getting that price approved on the contractual side and on the PSC side again.
And the contractors have been paid pursuant to the currently existing price list, and any additional payment to them would be the difference
That
between
would be the
that list
retroactive
and
payment.
this list. Okay, thank you. Commissioners.
Quick question. Do we know how much money is represented by these retroactive payments to the vendors?
So this is very hard to determine. Obviously, we'll have to go on a per line item basis on all jobs that have been completed since contract started, or since the agreements for the LWA started. The price difference are mostly on the HVAC side. At this point, we're estimating very roughly it would be around $80,000. But we'll have to, it changes daily as new projects are completed.
Fair enough. I didn't fall out of my chair when you said that number, so.
Can I just ask quickly about the Board of Public Works? So when this was presented to the Board of Public Works, it was, were they aware of this, as you state right here, or it's stated in the buck sheet, you knew it was going to, the price list was going to go up. Were they aware of the amount it would go up, or how did that come about, that discussion with them?
So we have actual contracts, and the contracts have the price list that was submitted as the price proposal, as the pricing that they are to be paid, with a provision in the contract that said payment of the pricing is contingent upon Public Service Commission approval. The Board of Public Works did understand that there was going to have to be further approval of the individual line item pricing, and so that was something that was actually addressed with the Board of Public Works in a pre-meeting. And when the Board of Public Works approves the contract, they are approving the overall not to exceed contract amount, not the individual line item pricing. So not to speak out of turn, but I think it's kind of the overall payment is the territory of the Board of Public Works. The individual line item measure pricing is really something that we need to have approved by the Commission.
Great, thank you. So yeah, it didn't seem like the Board of Public Works would just issue a blank check, so it sounded like they did have an
Right,
upper
yes,
bound
absolutely.
control. Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for, I guess, either party. Regarding the limited income work group's position. It kind of sounds like, just based on what I've seen here, and there isn't a representative of the actual work group here. So what happened? I mean, it sounds as though the work group made some suggestions, but they weren't acceptable, or nothing came of it. So it just kind of, so nothing happened? Is it?
So I think there's, the work group is not only state agents that are bound by the procurement process. I think there were a lot of good ideas that would have worked if the department had some flexibility in what they were to have paid the contractors. But once you go through that process and you make awards based on the pricing submitted by the contractor, I think one of the ideas floated at the work group was that, a median price list be established that kind of represents the middle of the range for all the contractors. There were some other similar ideas that just are not legally okay for the department because they are bound to pay the contractor what the contractor agreed to in submitting the proposal and what the award was based on.
I'm sorry. So it sounds like some of the proposals or suggestions were they might have been useful, but they weren't useful because of the posture in which the work group was engaged. So is it that they were engaged at too late a time? Should they have been earlier? Should the meeting have occurred earlier before the contracts were issued? Or?
So I'm going to ask Ms. Tran to follow up. I think that one of the goals in the future is to have a much earlier work group process so that it's not happening at the same time as the procurement itself is being developed, so there's less of a potential for conflict with a contractor participating in the work group and saying, here's what we think pricing should be, and then going ahead and bidding on the pricing, because there's a risk of conflict and collusion there. I think from the perspective of the work group meeting that took place, maybe someone from the procurement department should have been at the work group so it was understood that these good ideas in a kind of regular market are just things that cannot happen given the restraints of the procurement process.
I can add some more information about the work group process because I've been at those work group meetings. And one thing that was important to note is that the conflict of interest that exists between, there are contractors that are bidding on this contract and they're also part of the work group. While the procurement is ongoing, and in this case it took 1.5 years, there is no legal way to get contractors' input on pricing while they're also bidding on the same procurement. So that was one constraint that we had to work with. And that's just one issue why this came about this way. We are planning to regroup the work group at the beginning of next year to figure out a way how that can be avoided going forward, but it's really the procurement process is very sensitive. It's about fair and open competition, and there can't be any conflict of interest with the work group.
Okay, thank you for that. During the procurement process, was there any information, were you able to kind of glean what happened in terms of the differences between the prices that were initially included in the materials that the Commission was presented and the eventual pricing list that was developed? I mean, did the cost of labor go up?
So in some cases, costs have gone up. The price list that was initially presented to Commission that was a year old. It's 1.5 years old at this point. And at that point, the pricing was informed based on market research, based on industry standard labor rates. It could not anticipate any additional administrative costs that the contractors typically have to build in order to perform the quality of work with the amount of documentation that's required for this program. So that's something that could not be anticipated. And also at that point, the contractors, the ones who are actually have good information on pricing, they could not participate in the work group at that time. We did have a work group meeting at that time that excluded anybody who wanted to bid on the procurement, so it included DV Utilities, it included OPC, PSC staff at that time, but they did not have that really close to market understanding of what the price should be.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Tran, can you just for the record state and spell your name?
Nicola Tran, Nicolatran.
Great. Thank you very much. Any additional questions? Seeing none, is there a motion for this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve DHCD's individual measure price list for each bidder and allow retroactive payments for the work performed from the time period from the effective dates of each agreement to the date the Commission approves the new measuring pricing structure.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda, item number 5, is Washington Gas Light Company filed its proposed updated discount rates applicable to the purchase of receivables.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. Washington Gas Light Company is proposing to revise the discount rates to be charged retail gas suppliers for commodity charges that are sold under COMAR 20-590506. POR discount rates reflect costs incurred by the utility to provide purchase of receivables service to choice customers on behalf of retail suppliers. Consistent with Commission orders on this matter and WGL's tariff, WGL's proposed POR discount rates are composed of information technology programming costs, which represent a credit for residential customers, actually uncollected cost experience net of write-offs from retail customers for the most recent 12-month period, incremental collection costs, and a reconciliation factor designed to true up all over and under collections of these elements except bad debt. WGL has followed Commission precedent by including late payment revenues in its POR calculation, and where POR discount rates are calculated to be negative, has reduced those rates to 0. This has resulted in rates of 0% for the residential class and 0.4%, which is an increase from 0 last year for non-residential customers. Staff has reviewed WGL's filings and recommends the Commission accept the rates as filed to be effective November 20th, 2018.
Thank you. Council for Washington Gas.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. John Dodge appearing on behalf of Washington Gas. Nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the company's revised POR discount rates for filing with an effective date of November 20th, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? The motion is approved.
The next item, item 6, is also following from Washington Gas Light Company. It's its request for approval of the MP Plus volume corrector pressure recorder in accordance with COMAR 2055-0502B.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is WGL's filing requesting approval for the Eagle Plus MP Plus volume corrector pressure recorder manufactured by Eagle Research Corporation as a backup to WGL's suite of approved Mercury Instruments electronic volume correctors. An electronic volume corrector is an electronic solid-state ancillary device that attaches to commercial and industrial natural gas meters and corrects natural gas flow measurements based on differences in gas line pressure and temperature. COMAR 20.55.05.02b states that the Commission must approve beforehand any pressure or temperature device that may be used for the purpose of correcting the registration of a meter. The MP Plus is intended for use at industrial and commercial customer locations and is an industrial microprocessor-controlled computer designed for measurement applications. The MP Plus is already approved by the New York Public Service Commission, and Eagle Research Corporation tested the MP Plus and certified that it is designed and tested to comply with national standards set forth in the American National Standards, or ANSI, Code B109.3. Staff's Engineering Division has reviewed the documentation provided by WGL and concludes that the meter complies with the relevant COMAR standards. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the MP Plus corrector.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak, and good to see you, Mr. Spiegelman. Counsel for Washington Gas.
John Dodge again for Washington Gas. I would only add that the company asked the manufacturer to run a Maryland-specific test to make sure that the results were within the boundary of COMAR, and those came back and were positive and were reflected in our report, and I believe staff's analysis.
Very good. Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm tempted to ask Mr. Dodge how this thing works, but I won't do that. But I'm curious, do we know what these aren't used on low-pressure systems, are they? They're used in industrial applications?
Yeah, correct.
I'm sorry?
Industrial applications.
Industrial, no low-pressure systems?
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm not sure.
Ah, okay. Do you know, Mr. Dodge?
I believe they're only medium and high-pressure installations for commercial and industrial customers.
Fair enough, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spiegelman.
I'm sorry, I just for record purposes, for Commissioner staff, on page 2 of your of the buck sheet, the operating temperature range, it's not a big deal. I guess it's something just to correct for the record purposes. It has 40 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Fahrenheit as the same thing, so they're definitely not. So I just was surprised that it would be tested at such a low level. Hopefully we'll never have to get there, but just something I noticed, that's all.
Good catch, Commissioner Linton. I was never good at calculating Fahrenheit to Celsius. Thank you. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move the Commission approve the MP Plus volume corrector / pressure recorder.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Thank you. The final item, Mr. Secretary.
Final item is Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Inc. filed its interim assessment of the effectiveness of its correction action plan. It's case number 9353.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Peter Wolfson on behalf of the staff. SMECO's interim assessment of correction action plan is filed in compliance with Commission Order number 88814 after a finding in September by the Commission that SMECO's correction action plan was, and this is a quote, light on detail and seemingly not targeted to measures that will drive the company's SAFE score lower. In addition, the Commission directed the company to improve both its SAIDI and SAFE scores. Staff has reviewed SMECO's interim report and determined that SMECO is now on track, if it follows the interim plan, to meet its 2018 reliability targets. Staff also finds that the filing complies with the reporting requirements of the Commission's order and recommends that the Commission note the filing.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. McDougall.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Mark McDougall on behalf of Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative. SMECO has prepared a very short presentation if the Commission would like us to present that. If not, we are here to simply answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for supplying us with a copy of the presentation in advance. Do commissioners wish to see the formal presentation, or are they happy with what they have, including a summary page on the slides?
Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable with all the materials we have thus far, and not necessarily needing the company to go through it. Appreciate the information. So I just wanted to confirm that you're on target for meeting your 18 goals. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Herman, SMECO is.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question. There was some discussion about the planning process that SMECO uses. Can you give us an update on how that's maybe changing or evolving?
Commissioner O'Donnell, I have brought with me today two gentlemen who could address that, and I'd like to bring at least one of them to the microphone. Chris Norton is SMECO's Managing Director of Electric Operations and Construction, and I'm sure he can answer that question.
Good morning. Our planning process, as the staff noted, does not include margins in our planning. We've never followed that process. We have a fairly robust process that reviews basically results over the course of 3 or 4 years to determine where we should spend our money, what we need to work on. We're actually at the end of the existing 5-year plan. 2019 is the last year, so we're actually in the process now of reviewing what work we'll do in 2020 through 2025. We're still having internal discussions about how we should incorporate some of those planning margins and whether that will impact some of the work we do. But right now, we're full speed ahead on evaluating performance to determine what we should work on.
Okay, fair enough. I think that there was some understanding or some better understanding on SMECO's part with regard to what staff was suggesting with regard to margins, and hopefully some of that will be incorporated into your planning processes and will show, so that we don't get into this every other year missing our SAIDI goal or safety goal.
We understand the concern, and we have taken staff's recommendation to heart.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, appears that the utility's on the right track here. I would move that we note the filing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. The filing is noted. Seeing no additional business before the commission today, this meeting is adjourned. Have a happy Thanksgiving.